What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Mayday, a show about the show. It is May 19th, that is Monday, May 19th, and we got so many things to talk about. Before we get into it, though, I just want to thank everyone for engaging with my personal YouTube channel, that is Trevor May Baseball, which we will be broadcasting the second hour of this show on. So once we leave here, make sure you get over there. And thank you so much for all the subscriptions. We are now just under 106,000. Though, on behalf of the Foul Territory Network and this channel, Foul Territory, thank you for the 60,000 over 100. I don't know how they blew past me like they did, but I love to see it. So thank you guys for all of your support of both channels. And everyone over at Twitch, keep doing what you're doing. On the docket for today, we're going to be getting into the reinstatement of some of these guys that were banned for life from baseball. And I want to give you a little bit of context on it and maybe some parts of these stories that you may have forgotten about. There's a good chance. And also some of the other names that are on that list, because I know everyone knows about Pete Rose, but I don't know if everyone knows about everything else. We'll do the news. And I have a very special presentation building off of last week's conversation about conversation about Bob Nutting and the Pirates and what they are doing. And it got me thinking about a little bit of a deeper question. So without further ado, we're just going to go right into it. Like I said, Mayday. It's the 19th. And they're back. In the last week, I can't remember exactly which day, but it was last week, Pete Rose and 15 others were officially reinstated from the ineligible list for Major League Baseball. They were banned for life for various offenses, and now they are back and not banned for life. Now, nobody on this list is currently living, so by the technical letter of the rule, that is Rule 21, or at least Rule 21 in Pete Rose's case, which is the one that has to do with gambling. And most of these things do have to do with gambling. There's a few outliers, but most of them do. It does say lifetime. And if you're outside of that lifetime, should we still be banned? But I don't think that's the question. I know that this was a conversation that was a hot topic, this past week, and a lot of people gave their opinions on it. But I do my show every Monday. And so God forbid any big news comes out on Monday evening or Tuesday, because then we got to wait 5 days or 6 days for me to talk about it. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit about who's been reinstated and try to maybe figure out why now, because there are some weird extenuating circumstances when it comes to all this stuff. And then I'm going to end up by giving you my opinion on, now that they are eligible again, who should go to the Hall of Fame and what information should we take into account when we're making that decision. So that's Pete Rose, and this is Reinstated. So as we know, Pete Rose reinstated. A lot of people were asking, why now? Like, he passed away 8 months ago. Why didn't we do this during his life? But it just so happens the current president of the United States, Donald Trump, decided to pardon him. Now, that raises, honestly, so many questions that I couldn't get into all of them. Like, I don't really know. I didn't know that Donald Trump even watched baseball. So that was a little bit, it's kind of out of nowhere. Also, you don't have to pardon somebody who wasn't legally in trouble either. So he didn't really need that either. So that was also confusing. But those two things aside, there was a pardon and a conversation between Donald and Mr. Trump and Rob Manfred. And here we are, right? So just to refresh your memory, and I'm going to refresh your memory on not only Mr. Rose, but also everyone else on this list, why they were banned in the first place. Pete Rose got caught in 1989, great year, my birth year. Basically, he got a lifetime ban for betting on baseball when he was the manager of the Reds at the time, most of which was on his own team. Now, he says it was all on his own team. It doesn't really matter at this point. Betting is betting, and you can't really do any of that. And it is explicitly said in Rule 21 in the rule book that you will receive a lifetime ban, and there is no gray area here. It's actually so clear, in fact, that in spring training, I heard this over a dozen times in spring training, every team has someone on the staff. It used to be the GM or the owner even, and then over the years, it kind of just like got trickled down the old ladder until it got to like an intern, and they had to stand up in front of everyone in the clubhouse in big league spring training and read the rule word for word. Which, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I should have gotten the rule. It is really long though, so I don't really want to bore you guys, but you can look it up. You can look it up on the internet. Rule 21 is very explicit, and he, for all intents and purposes, just broke the rule. Like, it's pretty clear. Then we have the 1919 Black Sox, famously led by Shoeless Joe Jackson. A lot of people actually assume Shoeless Joe like led the throwing of the World Series during that time, but in reality, he was just their best player. You don't get a nickname like Shoeless Joe if you're not absolutely nasty on the field. Okay, so he's just like, he was the star of the team at the time. But of those 8 men that were banned, there was Shoeless Joe Jackson. There was Eddie Sicate, a star pitcher who confessed to being part of it, who was maybe the pitcher version of Shoeless Joe. Then we have Claude Lefty Williams, another pitcher. Then we have Chick Gandil. You're going to notice something with these names. We don't have names like this anymore. We need to bring them back. All right, player? We got Swede Risberg, Fred McMullen, Happy Feisch, and Buck Weaver. I might have said Feisch's last name, right? That looks like Feisch. Felsch? No, Felsch, not Feisch, Felsch, who was an outfielder. They all just kind of were like, yeah, let's do this thing. It turns out that Shoeless Joe was asking for a certain amount of money and wasn't only made a lower amount of money. We could go all, hey, owners should just pay their players more. Maybe they don't throw the World Series, but I think that's neither here nor there for this. But those 8 men are now reinstated. The other individuals included are Gene Paulette. He was banned in 1921 for allegedly accepting gifts from gamblers and associating with them during his playing career. It's accepting bribes, more or less gambling. Then there was Benny Koff. He was an outfielder also banned in 1921 after being acquitted for grand theft auto theft charges. He was acquitted, so I don't know if that means he didn't steal a car, but the MLB was like, you know what? We don't want people like you around, so they banned him. Then we have Phil Douglas, a pitcher banned the next year for writing a letter expressing willingness to leave his team to help them lose the pennant race, which is odd. He wrote a letter. There's receipt. It's like writing a text to me like, yeah, dude, I totally quit so my team would not win the pennant. That must have been associated with gambling as well. We have Jimmy O'Connell, banned in 1924 for attempting to bribe an opposing player to throw games. Yikes. And then we have, who else? We have Cozy Dolan, great name. Coach banned alongside O'Connell in 24 for his involvement in the bribery attempt. So they both tried to get bribes. A coach was involved. And then we have Willie D. Cox. At the time, he's the owner of the Phillies, and he was actively betting on baseball in 1943, not knowing that it was illegal, which is probably why everyone has to listen to Rule 21 now. So William D. Cox, or as I call him, Willie D. All right. So we had an owner actually betting, which is crazy. So now all these players presumably are available to go into the major leagues. I've been told that I am not live somewhere, and I don't understand why. I think that I am, so pause. Foul territory are my people there, because I'm being told it is live. You can't be doing this to me, Matt. It's not in the middle of the show. Anyways, moving forward. Continuing on. Okay, so all these guys are presumably available to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. All right. Now, I don't really know, especially when it comes to the old school crew, how that's going to work, if that's like the Veterans Committee or what have you. But it is what it is. So I guess we'll have to wait and see next year how they put them on the ballot. But what I want to talk about, and by the way, we have all these people's names. So let's just go through the list of these guys because these are great. I love these pictures too. So this right here, this is Benny Koff. This right here is Phil Douglas. I love that guy. He looks a little bit like Babe Ruth. We got Jimmy O'Connell right here. Good looking man. Cozy Dolan right there. And that's Willie D. That's Willie D. Cox right there. That guy looks like a Willie D. Cox, I'll be honest. I don't know what that means. But what I really want to talk about is Pete Rose, because Pete Rose is the hit leader all time in the major leagues. Now, I am about to have a hot take, so everyone buckle up and hold on tight. Make sure you're sitting down, please. I would appreciate that. I think that had Ichiro come over to the major leagues at 20, he would be our all-time hit leader. Just saying. Take with that what you will. Pete Rose is the greatest hitter of all time, though. He is. So, we got that out of we're good? Okay, we're good. But let's talk a little bit about Pete, because this is Pete doing an interview, being asked about the allegations, okay? He seems like, me? I did it? It's interesting because, yeah, he did. So let's go through what happened with Pete Rose, because a lot of people just like, oh yeah, he bet on baseball. But there's a lot more to this story, and I want to give you all the details, all right? So he was accused of betting on MLB games, including those involving his own team, the Cincinnati Reds, as he was serving as manager. This is 1989. This is how the whole thing planned out. Then Commissioner Bartlett Giamatti, that's Paul Giamatti, maybe they're related. Bartlett Giamatti commissioned an investigation by lawyer John M. Dowd, not to be confused with John Dowd from one of the greatest baseball games ever played or ever made, MVP Baseball 2005. This was actually Barry Bonds. Barry didn't want to be included with all licensing. He thought that his likeness was worth more money, and so we had John Dowd, and I think his name's John Dowd for a little bit of a reason. Possibly. I don't know. It seems a little bit kind of on the nose that's the same name of the guy who caught Pete Rose. Anyway, do with that with what you will. And it was called the Dowd Report, which detailed Rose's betting activities. On August 23rd, 1989, Rose agreed to a settlement that included a lifetime ban from baseball. So he agreed. He agreed to it, though he never admitted that he did it, but he agreed to take the ban. Now that seems like those aren't really mutually exclusive. They're kind of connected, but it is what it is. And then 15 years later, when he released a book called My Prison Without Bars, then he admitted that he did it. So 15 years later is when the actual, okay, yeah, I bet on baseball, and he happened to do it when he released a book that was presumably paying him. So that makes, I mean, using a bombshell like that or that juicy little nugget of information and getting some money out of it, I don't fully blame him for that. But there is more. So Pete Rose, this is the only thing that's ever happened with Pete Rose, and this is where I'm going to get into whether or not I believe, or if I were a voter for the Hall of Fame, these things would come into play when I'm talking about it. All right. There's 1990. He was charged with filing false income tax returns, so tax evasion. The next year, he was charged with tax evasion, failing to report income from autograph signings and memorabilia sales. He was convicted. He pled guilty and was sentenced to 5 months in prison, fined $50,000, and did 1,000 hours of community service. So this is the next year. He got arrested and sentenced for tax evasion. Then, in 2017, there was an allegation from a woman that alleged that he had a sexual relationship with her in the 70s when she was 14 or 15 years old. He acknowledged the relationship but claimed he thought she was 16, which was the legal age of consent at the time. Now, this is not something I want to talk about a lot. It just needs to be mentioned as part of the legacy of Pete, because that is part of it. That did happen. He admitted that it happened. Whether or not you agree with it or not, I mean, I don't think a lot of you probably do, but I'm going to leave it there. But that also happened. Okay? That also happened. So let me just touch on a few things. I want to talk a little bit about what the Hall of Fame is and what it represents, what it means. Like why is the Hall of Fame such a big deal? And the biggest thing is a museum. It's a chronicle of everything that's happened, good or bad or indifferent, in Major League Baseball and how the game has become what it is today. All the best players are there, or should be presumably, but it is being used or wielded as a consequence for bad behavior as a player. Okay, we know there's several guys being left out for either convictions for steroids or suspensions for steroids or allegations around steroids. Some guys have gotten in. That's getting a little bit muddy, and that's going to be a conversation we're going to have louder and louder and louder over the next few years, I'm sure. But in my opinion, or the way I feel what the Hall of Fame is for, is as a player going into the Hall of Fame, especially while you're still living, it is a club. It is a way for you to continue to give back to the game and receive from the game, which I like. I like because baseball's careers end, and it is a good thing that players can continue using that status later in life to either compensate themselves and give back to the game and be a presence. I think that's a good thing, right? But the question is, what lines do we draw at recognition, and what standards do we hold to the people as human beings to allow them in as a player that is being recognized for their body of work? Okay, I'm being told we're not live in foul territory, so I'm going to fix that real quick. Be right back. We'll do it live. We're doing it live. All right, continuing on with our presentation. So, of course, I am in a very, very touchy part of this story. But what does it mean, and what do I think? I think that integrity and honesty matter. Even taking out what happened, right? Even taking out the betting and the tax evasion and the questionable relationship. It was the lying, I think, that would probably put me into the no category, right? It's that, all of that, plus one last thing that happened very recently during the Shohei Ohtani, Ippei Mizuhara, his translator stealing money and doing all this stuff. Pete Rose put out a video that it certainly looked like it was in a casino type of place, which just happens to be ironic. I don't know that for certain, though. That's allegedly. Let me just be very clear there. But he was in a social setting and said, man, I wish I had an interpreter or I would have gotten away with it. And that was just in poor taste, big time for me. And also, he admitted to doing the thing, so let's not make jokes about it because you did it. Like, at no point did there feel like there was much remorse. And at no point did it feel like there was much thoughtfulness or willingness to change it all. And also, there was in 2016, when Rob Manfred took over as commissioner, he was asked to be reinstated. He was then asked, do you still bet on baseball? And he said yes. So the behavior never changed. So if the behavior never changed, then you just don't get that opportunity back just because it's been a long time, in my opinion. Now, we'll see in the next few years whether or not he deserves it, but that's just important to me, and people will show what's important to them when they make their votes. And let's be very clear here. Just because I don't think that should happen at this point, I still recognize him as the hits leader. And I think that's a stupid argument that's made a lot. Like, yeah, but he's got 4,100 hits. Okay, cool. He has 4,100 hits. His name is still the top name on the hits list, but he doesn't need to be inducted to be, for that record to count, he doesn't need to be inducted. He's still the hits leader. That's fine. Just maybe we don't recognize all the other stuff. That's my opinion, and it is. Where's the line? And also the circumstances around this are just weird. And it feels almost like, oh, this person did this thing, admitted to doing this thing, and we got to let him off the hook just because. I don't really understand where this came from or why it is the way it is. And that's just my take. But was he the greatest hitter of all time? At this moment, yeah. Yes, he was. And I don't think those two things can both exist where he doesn't, it's just not a place he gets to be, but he also was still the greatest hitter of all time. It's just the way it is. Let me know in the comments what you think. All right, we're gonna move on. I want to get into the news because I have a long presentation for our main story of the day. But I apologize for the technical difficulties. All right, moving on. Bye, Pete. All right, let's get into the news. Before I get in the news, I got to do this. All right, let's get into some heckin' news. Quite a few things happen here going into the final week of spring training as we get ready. News. I'm going to try to develop my skill at getting quickly through these things and just hitting them. All right?
Let's get into the news.
Let's get into the news. Clayton Kershaw's back, everybody. He allowed 5 runs in a season debut in a 10-9 or 11-9 loss to the Angels as they were swept. Ooh. Clayton Kershaw lasted 4 innings Saturday night, allowing 5 runs, 5 hits against the Angels, walked 3, struck out 2, and threw 48 of 83 pitches for strikes. It's always good to see him back. I just want to put that out there first and foremost. Though it was not the best outing of his life, you know, the guy's thrown a lot. He's an older guy. Like, just give him some time. He'll figure it out a little bit. Kershaw is the Dodgers' career strikeout leader, and he now is only 30 away from 3,000. So I'm going to give him a little round of applause. That's a lot of strikeouts. That's 6 times more than me. But I was a reliever. I couldn't have caught him. He's so good. He's one of the greatest pitchers of our generation. Here's a quote from him after that. Obviously, I wanted to pitch better. I need to pitch better going forward, he said. The problem tonight was command. I had really bad command tonight, so I think I can fix that, which is good. So, bad command's something he is known for and he is used to being better at. So I have faith in this gentleman. All right, next up, Jake deGrom is back. 8 strong innings. Oh, struck out 7 over 8 strong innings. Walked just 1 in a 1-0 win, out-dueling current, in my opinion, front runner for the AL Cy Young, Hunter Brown on the other side, throwing 69, nice, of 96 pitches for strikes in his last 6 starts. He now has a 1.49. Surprise! Jacob deGrom's nasty as I'll get out. Always good to see Jake back on the mound, throwing cheddar biscuits. He's throwing like 96 to 98. Take a step back a little bit, and maybe, just maybe, we could see something impressive out of the guy this year. We all know that the Rangers need him. The twin streak, unfortunately, ends at 13 straight wins. Now, everyone knows Twins started the season extremely slowly, so it's good to see them come back. My boys, keep it going. Jackson Chourio robbed Royce Lewis of a game-tying home run in the 8th inning to really solidify the win, which was really impressive. It's the 4th longest in franchise history. They had a Senators team that did 17 straight. In 1991, they had a 15 straight, and then they've had 2 13s in a row, or not in a row. One was Senators, and then this 13 was the 4th overall. And also, it looks like one of my 10 bold predictions from the beginning of the season is wrong. I predicted that the Cleveland Guardians would lead the league in a win streak this year with 10. Turns out it was the Twins. It is always an AL Central team, it seems like, though, which is interesting. But in those 13 straight wins, they literally only gained 3 games on the Tigers, which is mind-boggling. The Detroit Tigers still have the best record in the AL, so I don't feel so bad, but it's going to be a tough team to catch. But it's good to see the Twins back in the fold for sure. We have a nasty Major League debut alert. This is Mick Abel. He was the 15th overall pick by the Philadelphia Phillies in the 2020 draft. And he led the Phillies to a 1-0 win over the fighting Paul Skenes Pittsburgh Pirates. Paul Skenes threw the other team, and nobody's talking about him, even though he threw his first career complete game. Also believes striking out 9, but Abel was definitely the talk of the town. He threw 62 of 84 pitches for strikes and started 16 of 22 with strikes as well. That is rare for a starter to do in their first game in the major leagues. That is rare, though he's fortunate that he lined up with the Pirates. We talked about that last week. He was averaging 97 on the four seam. Guy throws cheese. Guy's got a nasty sweeper. I don't know. He's fun to watch. I watched the highlights. It was chef's kiss. So big fan. Congratulations to Mick. And Skenes threw a 3-hitter with 9 strikeouts in a CG, but lost 1-0. That's one of those tough luck days. You hate to see it. But he's at a 2.44 on the season, making a case for the Cy Young as everyone thought he would. And we'll talk a little bit more about Paul Skenes later on in the show. Subway Series, Juan Soto goes back to the Bronx, goes 1 for 10. Generally struggles and generally gets booed every moment his face is shown on the field, to the point where the bleacher creatures actually turned their backs when he ran out there, which I don't know. That's hard. That hurts. I wouldn't like that. Ooh, wouldn't like that at all. Cody Bellinger capped off the Sunday game in an 8-2 win for the Yankees, taking the two of the 3 games from the Mets in the Subway Series. And Max Fried threw really, really well. 6 effective innings as the Yankees took 2 of 3, like I just mentioned. And Soto did not come to play really, and he absolutely gets buckled on a couple breaking balls, which I'm sure will show up in the nastiest pitches of the week in hour 2. If they don't, you guys are not on top of this. You gotta figure it out. All right, a couple more quick things. Jose Alvarado has been suspended by 80 games for MLB for taking a weight loss drug in the offseason in order to shed a few pounds. He was their closer. He has been throwing pretty good. And now the Phillies are left with Jordan Morano and Ryan Kettering as their 2 options to close games. Both nasty, but they're not feeling as solid about that bullpen moving forward. Alvarado is only eligible to come back on August 16th. And cannot pitch in the playoffs. So huge blow to the Phillies. You hate to see it. It's one of those things. This was something that we were told all the time, especially coming up through the minors. Don't go to GNC and take hydroxycut. It's the same type of thing. It has a similar active ingredient. Just don't do it. Unfortunately, sometimes guys just they feel like they have no other options to go for it. It doesn't have the effects of like bulking you up. It's supposed to do the opposite thing, so I'll put it out there. But he has the 7 saves for the Phillies, and now they are relegated to the other 2. And last thing on our list, Brandon Hyde is officially out as the Orioles manager after starting the season 15-30. What? That team is way too good to be that bad. They just are. Do I think it's all Brandon Hyde's fault? No. I think it's lack of doing anything in the offseason. I don't know if I've mentioned that ever here, but that's always what it is. So, again, we talked about it with Derek Shelton. We talked about it with Bud Black. They are the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to a front office. And if someone's got to take a fall, it's the manager first, and then you have to move your way up. But you know who it never is? The owner. So, it is what it is, but I hope Brandon had the best. He had a lot of success there, and the Orioles are in trouble. They are now 11 games back in the AL East, only a month and a half into the season. All right, guys, that is our news for the day. But before we get into our main subject, we got a little message for you from the other Foul Territory guys, which I wish was showing on their channel, but it might show on it later. All right.
I just want to say, before Arena Club, if you were trying to very actively buy, sell, trade, it was very complicated and used a lot of mail that was unnecessary.
Yeah, I didn't even know how to do it. But I'm glad we have Arena Club now because it's a one-stop shop for everything card-related.
It is. And right now, you can get 20% off your first slab pack or your first card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/FOUL. Use code FOUL. If you're a collector, you've got to check out Arena Club. Go get after it.
Go check those out because I'm not going to lie, those packs look kind of tasty. Actually, before we get into our main story, we had a great question from the Discord. If you guys ever want to ask a question, you don't get it in on this on the broadcast. By the way, if you are asking questions in the chat anywhere, just know they're probably getting picked up to be answered later. So don't worry. Just hang out. Just hang out if they're not getting answered right now. This is from Brian Wilson Agathor, two regulars there over the Discord. Join the Discord, exclamation point Discord in the Twitch chat if you're over there. How much are you fined if you get ejected? That is a great question. And then a follow-up. How do they assess fines? As in, is the money taken out of a single paycheck? Can you get a payment plan? Where does the fine money go? All phenomenal questions. So let's talk a little bit about fines. I think this is coming from possibly Don Kelly getting ejected for the first time. Most ejections don't have fines associated, I don't believe, or they're waived. But if there's like contact with an umpire or something egregious happens, then they will be taken. But here's how fines work. Fines are usually in the hundreds of dollars. So this isn't the NFL. We're not getting fined like $18,241 for wearing cleats that we're not supposed to wear. Like it's not ridiculous like Goodell puts stuff out there. It's more manageable, okay? And also we don't do as many things that can be fined. And if it is taken out, it's taken out of just one paycheck, obviously. It's not a payment plan because they're not that big. So yes, that's one way that it can be done. But most of the time, the fines go towards funding of some of the other charitable programs. So this is actually a thing that a lot of people don't know. But part of the CBA is when players are fined and they pay their fines, it usually goes to things like Play Ball or BAT, which is a baseball assistance team that helps anyone in the baseball world that's dealing with something that is a high cost. It's usually medical bills or destitution for whatever reason. If you played one day in the minor leagues, you were eligible for that. So like really good programs. There's a lot of really good ones going to take care of our baseball family, and all of the fine money goes in that direction. So a lot of guys aren't really worried about paying them. That is usually where they're done, and so. It is almost always paid in a lump sum, and it almost always goes to one of those charitable initiatives done by Major League Baseball in conjunction with the Players Association. So I thought that was awesome. I had to do it once. I won't get into it, but I felt good about where my money went. So, all righty, here we go. Let's get in to our main segment, our main story of the day. Ooh, I'm excited. I worked really hard on this one, so I really hope I deliver because I'm really hyping this up. Rapsodo and Hawkeye all tell you this information. Paul Skenes has added 2 pitches to his arsenal going into 2025. No! Don't do it! Don't!
Buckle up. It's time for some Maceplaining.
I absolutely love that song. Okay. Maceplaining. Why your team owner does nothing. And in terms of does nothing, doesn't win very much. Last week, I did a bit of an expose on the Pirates, trying to understand what the hell they're doing over there and why they can't win. And we came out, basically at the end of the day, it's Bob Nutting's fault. It's their owner's fault. It's the way that he operates and the way he operates his businesses that are the main culprit, which got me thinking, can we talk about other owners? Which got me thinking even more. And I have a couple theories, so let's get into them right now. Theory number 1, you can predict your team's future success based on how its current owner made their money. Now, just to give you a little context on this, I wanted to look at, because Bob Nutting is in newspapers, and he buys local newspapers. His family's been doing this for over 100 years. And what they do is they get them profitable, and then they just let them sit. And that got me thinking, oh, he just likes passive income. So, of course, he runs his baseball team that way, which is terrible to run a baseball team. You're never going to be competitive, which they're not, ever. Every once in a while, a person like that will just run into, I don't know, like a 3-year stretch where you have the MVP in the league and you make the playoffs 3 years in a row and then never be good again. That's what happened to him. So you can predict an MVP team's future success based on how their owner made their money. And those owners go in two buckets, okay? I kind of separated them into two. One, they inherited their money from some industry, from their parents or from their family or whatever, or they were self-made and they bought their team. So they bought their team and they built it up. There's some guys that bought their team and then they became billionaires because they owned a team. That would be considered self-made because that's the business that they built. So there are a couple that way. But for the most part, it's one or it's the other. And so I wanted to see, do self-made owners do a better job overall? Is there any trends where self-made are better than inherited owners, owners that inherit their money, or vice versa? Is this a thing, or am I just like being like, that's logical? I don't really know. So it was true for nutting, but I don't know if it's true for everybody else. And then I have a second theory. The adoption of technology and information has widened the gap in performance because I think self-made are better. And I think that the way that information is in making quick decisions, people who built their businesses are better positioned to do that than Nepo owners or inherited owners. I'm not going to say Nepo much here because I'm not out here I'm not trying to crap all over owners. Like, I know that people think that I want to do that, but everyone has different experiences. I don't know these people. A lot of them might be good people or normal people or whatever, right? They're just a product of their circumstances, whatever. We can get into sociology all day if we want. I'm just here to say, I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt and just say all these guys are doing their best, and what doing their best is just what they know. So let's just go from that. There's no evil happening. There might be somewhere, but like, I'm not gonna talk about it in that way. We're gonna try to keep it as baseline and default as possible so that we can just look at numbers and see if there's any correlation here between owning your team because someone gave it to you, or owning your team because you bought it. And there's some stuff. All right. So first thing I did was check right now. Okay. I just wanted to know, like, currently right now, as of actually yesterday when I ran these numbers, 12 of the owners inherited them. 18 of them were self-made. Okay. The records for inherited were 268 and 269. So they're one game under 500, which means self-made were one game over 500. That's pretty even, right? Regular season, there was nothing really there. Nothing there. Almost exactly the same, okay? But what about the last 15 years? So what I did was I thought about what is the technology information time in baseball. 2010 was about when teams started to invest in the data collection side of scouting and stuff, right? They're trying to like do performance testing on athletes, spark testing through Nike, stuff like this. Like, can we measure how athletic people are so we're not just watching them play baseball? We can actually have some baseline numbers that allow us to project them a little bit more efficiently. That started to really get steam in 2010 and then took off in like 14, 15 with like Hawkeye and all this stuff and TrackMan. This stuff now you guys know where we are. We are in daily. People are making up pitches because they can just check a machine, right? So some owners, I think, handled that better than others. So I wanted to see. Let's go look at the numbers, okay? This is the tech revolution I just mentioned. So this is how the owners were kind of broken up over those 15 years. Over those 15 years, there were 45 total owners of the 30 teams. That's either inherited or teams being sold, okay? So like, for example, Hal Steinbrenner taking the Yankees over in 2008, 2009 from George. Stuff like that. That would be a swap of an owner without the team being sold, okay? So there was 15 total. So I'm doing it in ratios of self-made over inherited. So it's always self-made is always the higher number, so I'll just put it on top, okay? There's 2.5 times as many self-made teams, owners, as there was inherited owners over this time period. I hope that makes sense. So just keep that number in mind. This is how the numbers broke out. This is the winning percentage. This is division wins. This is playoff appearances. This is pennants, and this is World Series all the way at the end, okay? So winning percentage, division, championships, playoff appearances in general, pennants, and World Series. You're gonna know something about some of those last numbers, all right? I think I found something. So this is playoff appearances. There was 53 by guys that inherited their teams. There was 107 by self-made owners. That comes out to about a 2.2. Okay. So playoff appearances, pretty even. Makes sense. Basically, it correlates the ratio of those owners with the ratio of teams, about the same. That's about what we would expect. Okay. Now, it was hard to separate what playoff appearance, like, because the number of playoff teams has changed 3 times, and also the format changes like every 4 years. So it's really hard to isolate like how that really helps. So I just said, okay, whatever, it's even. Oh, bag holder asks, where's the money spent on the roster? Trust me. That would be a cause. I'm looking for an effect really quick. I'm trying to see if this is real, okay? So that comes out to a 2. Division, 24 inherited 64. Okay. Now there's 2.75 times as many self-mades as inherited. So it's slightly swinging towards self-made when it comes to winning the division, not just making the playoffs. Division winners, self-made owners tend to win them a little bit more, and this is the last 15 years. But what about pennants? The teams that go to the World Series, what's that ratio look like? 25-5. That's 5 times as many. So there has been 25 of the last 30 pennants were won by a self-made owner. What about World Series? 13 of the last 15 were won by self-made owners. That's 6.5 times as many. So what this tells me, here's a little rundown. Owners, 2.2. So we're looking, how do all of these affected, or how do they all relate to that top one? They're about the same for playoffs, and then divisions it gets a little bit skewed, and then pennants it goes crazy, and then World Series it gets double crazy. I'm like, okay. So what that tells me is when self-made owners own a team, they tend to go farther into the playoffs than other teams. And why could that be? We'll talk about that in a minute. But I was like, has it always been this way, or is this real? Or is this just like a sample size thing? Because that's important with stats. So what I wanted to do was, I was like, all right, let's take the era before that, the golden era, as they call it, in the commissioner's office, from 1980 to 2009. So I did the same things and I took out the playoffs and divisions because they don't matter. We just did pennants and World Series for these. How successful these? So in those 30 years, it was about 4 times as many. Oh, these should be flipped, by the way. These numbers are backwards. I just realized that. There was actually 622 self-made. So there's 4 times as many self-made as inherited owners over those period of time. And this only includes teams that either went to the pennant, won a pennant, or won the World Series. So the other teams didn't matter because they didn't win. I wanted the teams that won over those 30 years, okay? The owners, 4 times as many self-mades, but only 2.6 times as many pennants and 3.2 times as many World Series. Interesting. Much more even from 1980 to 2009. Huh. Pre-technological revolution in baseball. So I said, why could that be? Could it possibly be that owners that inherited their team benefited from experience because it was all eye test? When the game became data-driven, self-made owners, people that had to learn to build a business at that time, were better suited to use those skills to build a baseball team. People who inherited their team were not. But then you flip that on its head. It goes the other way in the 30 years prior, where people who are brought up maybe in a clubhouse, maybe in a front office, when their dad's running the team and they're just a kid hanging out, and they watch so much baseball that they act on that knowledge, and that knowledge was gold then. Having knowledge of the game of baseball with your eyes was much better for building teams in this period than the last 15 years, which would line up with analytics, wouldn't it? So I was like, when I went through, because I went through this year by year, by the way. This took forever. So I deserve a cookie for that. This took forever. When I did this, there was 2 different things going on in this time period. Specifically, from 1980 to 1989, things were crazy, and I'll show you right now. After I tell you about this. So here's a few things that could be going in. There was significantly more corporate ownership in those 30 years, meaning there were certain teams that were just owned by a company, so it's hard to tell who the owner was. So like for a while there, like the Marlins were like owned by the league. Like right now, the Braves are owned by a media company. You know, it's hard to tell who the managing person is. So sometimes that stuff's kind of gets a little bit wishy-washy. There were a couple wins by NEPA owners, which in the first year in this period of them taking over. For example, George Steinbrenner loses. He steps back in 2008. Howell wins in 2009, but has Howell won since? So like sometimes an inherited guy gets the World Series win when it wasn't his team really. He just inherited it the first year. That happened once or twice. So that's a caveat as well. Also, from 80, this is supposed to be 80 to 89. From 80 to 89, I noticed this. 5 of the 7 World Series titles and 10 of the 16 pennants this is 83 to 89, were inherited. So in the 80s, it was inherited people winning everything. And then then the next 17, from 1990 to 2007, 17 straight World Series were won by a self-made owner. So I wanted to be like, okay, let's look at those first 10 years then of that. Let's look at 80 to 89. Because I want to know like who was winning this stuff and what were the owners doing. Owners, there was twice as many. So there's 20 at that time. Actually, this is before the expansion, so there's 28. It was 18 to 9. Pennants, 5 and 5. Pennants, 10 to 10. World Series, 5 to 5. So even though there was twice as many self-mades, inherited owners had an advantage in these 10 years. So where we start to see the shift is starting in 1990 to 2010, those 20 years is when it starts to swing towards self-made. And then when we hit the technological breakthroughs, self-made frickin' took over. Let me put this into context for you, okay? I'll give you a prime example of this in action. Right now, Steve Cohen is the wealthiest owner in the major leagues. Okay, we've seen stories about him over the years of kind of creating situations where other owners are a little bit afraid to go head-to-head with him, especially in free agency, because they're gonna lose. Hal Steinbrenner said that. Like, God, we can't match up with this guy all the time, or we're gonna lose. That's because Steve Cohen's business is hedge funds. The guy just has made deals his whole professional life. He is the richest owner because he's really good at it, okay? When your job is to compete all the time and win, and then you buy a sports team, and you have the most money, at that point you are inevitable. So it doesn't surprise me one bit that now their apparatus looks like a team that could be successful into the future and will be a powerhouse because they have built. He has made good decisions. He's made a bunch of mistakes, right? That's what anyone does when you're learning the business. But I think he's gotten a lot of those out of his system, and he is going to consistently produce winners, or he's going to be open to it. And we're not going to see rebuilds much from them anymore. But he has this skill set, right? This move quick, break stuff type skill set. Very, very, I think, modern businessy. And so when it comes to free agency, when it comes to trade deadline, he's not afraid to pull the trigger when people who inherited their team tend to move slowly on those situations because it's not how they didn't build it. They didn't fully build it. So it's just not part of how they've operated in the past. So why would they start now? When they run into a guy who is willing to make quick decisions worth millions and millions of dollars fast, they're getting railroaded. That's why the Mets are signing everybody. That's why they spent so much money, is because he just runs over the nepo owners that don't throw money around. They're just trying to hold on to things. And so we're seeing that a lot of the owners, by the way, the Dodgers, all self-made owners, same thing, they have a better understanding of how to move quickly and how quickly information can build a good sports team. And they're competitive because they were in competitive markets. The owner of the Reds is in meat packing. Nobody is disrupting the meat packing industry. He's got nothing to worry about. And so it's just business as usual. And that's why the Reds haven't won anything anytime soon. That's why Bob Nutting will never win, ever. Because he's just like, hey, give me my money and shut up. And I'm going to say it right now. There's probably a pretty clear reason why Hal Steinbrenner isn't winning a bunch of World Series anymore. He spends some money, and they made it last year. Like, they're not bad. They didn't go to being bad, but he's definitely not the shark that George was. I think that's pretty clear. And there's new kids on the block. And honestly, the success, at least the back end of the pennants in the World Series, are overwhelmingly swapped to guys that built their own businesses. And it's fascinating. So I want to know, should we go into individual teams at all? Should we talk individual teams at all? Because I want to talk about this. Like, this is fascinating. I did not know I was going to find the things I found. But it turns out that moving quick and taking information and making good decisions and bringing on people who think outside the box is much more valuable than, quote unquote, eye test traditional baseball knowledge at this point. It's just a better understanding of the game. Not that there's no value there. There is value there. It's important to have both. But the people who make decisions the fastest are winning more often, or have more conviction and really go for their things, are winning more often. And that shows up in the numbers, especially in the last 15 years. And that was Maceplaining this week, and I had a lot of fun doing this. So let me know. Let me know in the comments or in the chat if we should go deeper into any of this stuff, because I think it's awesome. I think it's fascinating. And before I leave, trade deadlines, same thing. Guys are willing to really go after the guys they want in the trade deadlines, and that, I think, has something to do with why they're better in the playoffs. They go and get their guys they need. They take chances and they make the moves, and they're not afraid to. All the guys that hold pat tend to not have the success that other teams have. All right, and D Formal says it right. Hal is more afraid to make mistakes than George. Exactly. When you make your own business, you take risks. When you inherit your business, you tend to not take as many risks. It's that simple. It's that simple. All right, let's pop into another little interesting breakdown, something we saw around and on the internet. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting. All right, this is Paul Skenes. We talked about the Pirates and why they never get better. So a lot of people said, hey, should we just trade him? Should the Pirates just trade Paul Skenes? And I have some opinions on that, which I will talk about in a moment. So in a recent appearance on the Pat McAfee show, MLB insider Jeff Passan said, the truth is there will be teams that ask about Paul Skenes at the deadline this year, and I don't anticipate that he's going to be moved. But there's a real argument to be made that the best thing for the Pittsburgh Pirates would be to move Paul Skenes while he has the most value. Now, there's a lot to unpack there. I agree with the value proposition of Paul Skenes, okay? He is one of the best pitchers in the major leagues. He will continue to be one of the best pitchers in the major leagues. But he's only in the second year of the 6-year rookie contract, and the Pirates aren't going to extend him. It's just not going to happen. All right? So, what would it take to get him for any team? And shout out to producer DK for throwing some of these proposals around, like what type of prospect haul would need to be pushed out for a guy like Paul Skenes so we can go get him if we are one of these other big teams like the Red Sox, the Orioles, or the Tigers, okay? But there's some issues with him, and there's a reason why this is very unlikely to happen, and Jeff Passan was very clear about this being really unlikely, and I agree with him. Because of control. I wanted to be, I thought this would be really interesting to talk about because he is so controllable. When you trade a guy where you have 4.5 years of control over him before you have to pay him big bucks, which is what the Pirates want. They want to keep people and pay them as little as possible, as long as possible. It only makes sense if your team's going to get way better immediately. And there are very few trades that make that happen. For example, DK gave me this one. The Red Sox, Roman Anthony and Franklin Arias for Paul Skenes. Though that's interesting, currently, neither one of those guys are in the big leagues. And Paul Skenes is going to be right there for the Cy Young as long as he's healthy for the foreseeable future. So that would still not be enough, in my opinion, for him. It wouldn't be enough because they don't know what kind of impact those two guys are going to have on the big league team. And you have to have that needs to be a full rebuild. So they would need more than that because two prospects, one of them might hit. I know one of them's the number 1 overall. But let's see. DK says in the chat, there was no precedent for this. I tried my best. He did try his best. But this is an interesting one. It's a trade that shouldn't happen, so you're off the hook, okay? So the Pirates are going to need one of two things, right? They're going to need lots of prospects, but they're also going to need big league talent right now. And the problem with big league talent right now is that would take 1 or 2 guys, which would then up the payroll for the Pirates, which is not something they want to do. So that's kind of off the table, but from a talent standpoint, they would need guys that are proven in the big leagues, at least one, to be involved in this situation because of the control. They're like, we need big league talent now as well as prospects because we're giving up so much control of this guy because he's going to be cheap for whatever he gets. But good big league talent, especially anyone on a deal, is too expensive for the Pirates. So, like, for example, you can't throw Rafi Devers in there because Rafi's way too expensive for the Pirates. Like, you'd have to throw him in and Red Sox be like, we'll cover $200 million. Like, that's the only way that would happen. They would have to eat so much of his salary for that to happen. And then they would have to pay Paul Skenes. And you can't do both of those things. There's very few teams that will. So going to get a premier talent for Paul that's being paid would be really hard to do. So that leaves us like guys who are like in their 5th year and potentially stars. Unfortunately, all these young guys that are going to be stars are all signed to mega deals. Like you can go get Jackson Merrill now, too expensive for the Pirates. Honestly, if you threw Campbell in here, too expensive for the Pirates. Anyone from the Braves, too expensive for the Pirates. So you would have to get somebody who's also on a rookie deal that's just as good. And those don't exist. So what about the Orioles? Jackson Holliday, Samuel Basallo, and Kobe Mayo? Again, is Jackson Holliday the big league talent? Because he's pretty much just Jack Zawinski. At this point, is that enough? I don't know. I don't know, because we don't know how the other two are going to pan out. Kobe Mayo? They're 15. They're just as bad as the Pirates. But they need hitting, but they're going to need premier hitting. They need a guy. They need a guy who's automatically the anchor for their team. They need like a Corey Seager, a Francisco Lindor. Like all these guys are being paid $300 million. There's no way they're going to get any of them. So if there's no big league talent involved, then the prospect haul has to be ridiculous. I'm talking 5 or 6 players. Ridiculous. But then that's not worth it for the other team. Because even in the most incredible year, Paul Skenes is worth what, like 7 WAR? That's 7 wins. He's a starting pitcher. He only pitches in 32 of the 162 games. There's only so valuable one guy can be. So if you're giving away all of your prospects, all of them, that trade-off needs to be like, oh, we could be trading away 30 WAR, or not 30, 30's a shit ton, but like 18 WAR for 7 WAR if it's prospects, if just 2 of them hit or 3 of them hit at any point. and we'd be hamstringing our entire minor league system just to get Paul. Can't do that either. So it's a conundrum. There's a reason it's not going to happen, but there's no world in which any of these works. Here's a few more, all right? Jackson Jobe, Max Clark, and Kevin McGonigal. Maybe a pitcher swap, maybe. That one's close. What about Jack Caglione, Blake Mitchell, and Noah Cameron? No big leaguers. Padres, Leo DeVries and Ethan Salas. They could use a catcher, I'll tell you that much. Maybe. The problem is he's so good and he's got so much control that you can't balance it, and you would have to be taking a massive risk. And as we just talked about, that risk ain't going to be happening with guys that inherited their baseball teams. So what do you guys think? A Dodgers-style deal? Maybe. Tigers would never do that? Exactly. Almost every scenario we throw out there, one of the two teams is like, nah, would just hang up. The conversation can't even happen at this point. So we'll check in with him after this season and see where we're at. But Paul Skenes needs to go somewhere so he can be happy a little bit. All right, guys, I'm going to take a little bit of a break and swap the stream over, even though it never went live on Foul Territory, which I'm going to have to deal with after this. But I will see you in about 2-ish minutes for hour 2 of Mayday. See ya in a moment.